That's a lot. That's a lot.
Get your cursor out now.
Thank you, and I would like to call to order the April 12th meeting of the Common Council. If you'll please rise and join me in pledging allegiance to our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Dixon, if you'll please call the roll.
Burnett,
Present.
Mr. Goldstein,
Here.
Miss Johnson,
Present.
Miss Najolski Eichner,
Present.
Miss Smith,
Here.
Miss Ayers,
Present.
Mr. Uvelman,
Present.
Miss Revoluz,
Here, present.
Miss Young,
Here.
Mr. Kites,
Here.
Miss McMurray,
Present.
Miss Alterman,
Here.
Mr. Keegan,
Here.
Mr. Livingston,
Here.
Miss Shanahan.
Here.
15, we have a quorum.
Thank you. First item on, well, first of all, welcome everybody to our first hybrid meeting. And it's a work in progress, I would imagine. But this is the first time we've been in the council chambers since pretty much the beginning of the pandemic. And we're really, I think, all happy to be back. Some of us are working remote for whatever reason, but we're trying to get back in council chambers on a more regular basis. So next item on the agenda is acceptance of the minutes of the regular meeting of March 22nd, 2022. Do I have a motion? Ms. Shanahan moves. Any corrections, deletions, omissions? Ms. Johnson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On page 8, second to last paragraph where it says Ms. Johnson asked if, that should read, if the recommendations would help the city government and the Board of Education become more equitable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other corrections, omissions, deletions? Seeing none, all in favor of the minutes as corrected. Thank you all. Next item on the agenda is public participation. Mr. Manzi, do we have anybody wishing to address the council?
We have a few people on, Mayor. If you'd like to address the council now, please raise your hand electronically and I will unmute you. I do not see anyone with their hand raised, Mayor.
Thank you. Is any council person have any correspondence or any information they wish to have read into the record? Okay, seeing none. Moving right along, we have the resignations and appointments. Reappointment of Darren Ostofine for the Water Pollution Control Authority. Do I have a motion?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to make that motion.
Ms. Smith makes the motion.
And I would like to say a few words on behalf of Darren Ostofine, my friend and neighbor. I've known Darren as long as I've lived in almost as long as I've lived in Norwalk. He's a good neighbor, a great dad, a family man, has two beautiful girls that have grown up. I mean, they've grown up in my house until they turned teenagers. So they're just a beautiful family, and his wife Carol as well. So just knowing them personally, it's my honor to move this reappointment forward. And I now, as chair of the Public Works Committee, I also sit on the WPCA. And so I am now able to work professionally with Darren, and he brings his more than 20 years of expertise as Assistant Director of Public Works for Darien to our WPCA, and he's doing a fine job of it, and we appreciate his work.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Any further comments? Mr. Keegan.
Thank you, Mayor. And as a member of WPCA, I will second Ms. Smith's remarks that Darren is a fine chairman of our committee. Thank you.
Any further comments?
Yeah,
told you
I'd
we'd-
just like to say thank you.
I'm sorry.
I hope to live up to that. Thank you.
I was going to praise you, but go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna try and live up to what you guys said. Wow,
You do.
thank you.
So if there are no further comments, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Darren, thank you for agreeing to stay on. I know that this is a difficult job, but you do it very well, and thank you and congratulations.
Thank you. Take care, folks. Thanks again.
Next item, the mayor's remarks. I have a couple. One, to begin with, our health department continues to monitor the COVID-19 situation on a daily basis. As you know, Norwalk has been experiencing, like many other places, a bit of an uptick in cases over the recent few weeks. Currently, the Connecticut Department of Public Health has reported that Norwalk's case rate is 8.7 per every 100,000, which has the city now in a yellow stage. Other communities around us are unfortunately in the red stage. This uptick in COVID activity is a result of the continued spread and increased prevalence of the Omicron subvariant BA2. So we're asking everybody to consider vaccinations, consider your boosters, wear your mask if you are in public places. Those are the kinds of things that helped us reduce the number of cases to begin with. On a more positive note, this morning, I went to the Norwalk Hospital and met with Senator Blumenthal. He's announcing a $2.1 million earmark that will go towards expanding substance abuse treatment and mental health outpatient services in Fairfield County, starting with Norwalk. And I want to thank Senator Murphy, Congressman Himes, and Senator Blumenthal for bringing this money into Norwalk. Its critical funding will be used to purchase capital equipment for a new outpatient mental health center at Norwalk Hospital to address the growing need for effective, affordable, and accessible substance abuse and mental health treatment right here in our community. Additionally, as you may know, under the American Rescue Plan, we've made funding, our council and I have made funding for mental health one of our city's top priorities. And from that $1.5 million of the American Rescue Plan Act funding, we've created the Community Recovery Fund. These funds will help local nonprofits expand services to critical mental health services throughout our community. As you know, obviously, there are many challenges due to the pandemic. Young people are experiencing difficulties. Older people, people have lost their jobs, lost their income, are experiencing significant difficulties. And we're hoping that we can help people get the treatment that they need and get back to some degree of normalcy as soon as they possibly can. Few other quick updates. Proud to announce that the city of Norwalk earned once again, and the Shanahan, you'll be glad to hear, the Tree City USA Growth Award for 2021 for the 16th consecutive year. As you know, trees and our tree canopy are one of our major priorities, and over the next few years, we plan to commit over $1 million to trees, and we will continue to heavily invest in and plant trees across the city. The benefits trees bring to our community are endless and include cleaner air, healthier residents, cooler temperatures, and more. That's why I'm proud of our progress for so many years being named a tree city. I'll end with one final quick announcement. As you may have seen, starting April 30th, the city will be accepting mattresses and box springs for free. Unfortunately, some people don't know what to do with them and they dump them on our city streets, and that's a blight that we can do without. So we want to make sure that we give people the opportunity to be able to call us, pick up the mattress, pick up the box spring, so they don't end up laying on the street someplace around the city. Collections will take place at the Norwalk Public Works Center located at 15 South Smith Street from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Also, and last but not least, certainly I want to wish our Christian friends and our Jewish friends both a happy Easter and a happy Passover, and wish the council the same. And thank you, Mr. Livingston. I turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And also, I'll echo your comments. It's good to be back live, or mostly live. If there's no objection, I would like to move first to the appointment section. I'd like to move the appointment of Patricia B. Agadow to the Board of Ethics as an alternate. Ms. Agadow is a seasoned business and human resources executive. She is currently Group Director for Human Resources for Amphenol RF Optics Broadband Solutions Group. In that role, she has, among other things, managed organizational leadership development, training, and employee counseling services, and was a mentor to local HR teams. I believe she'd be an excellent addition to the Board of Ethics, and I move her heartily. With that, if there are any other comments, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Agadel, for serving.
Thank you all. Thank you very much, very much. I'm looking forward to it. It's a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Now I'd like to turn to item A1B, 1A and 1B, the charter revision. This was by way of background. I, like many others, have long noted the need for a revision of our city charter. The charter was adopted back in 1913, and many of the articles remain as originally written. There's not been a comprehensive revision of the charter since its adoption back in 1913. The charter, as many of you know, contains provisions that are no longer applicable to current city operations. There are often also references to conditions and structures dating back to the time when the city was a town, 2 towns, elected positions that have no current function, and position descriptions with duties that no longer apply. And I think it's worth spending a couple minutes to note a couple of the more obvious examples of how dated this charter is. The first one has to do with the responsibilities of the mayor. I'll read this. The mayor shall be the conservator of the peace of the city and shall have authority with force and strong hand when necessary to suppress all tumults, riots, and unlawful assemblages, and to arrest without warrant and order to be held in the city prison for a period not exceeding 24 hours upon information any person who may be detected in reveling, quarreling, brawling, or otherwise behaving to the disturbance of the public peace of said city. That's one of the powers of the mayor in the current charter. On the council side, the council has the authority to purchase necessary fire engines, horse carriages, horses, and other fire apparatus at the expense of the 4th district. We also have the power to regulate the speed of animals, vehicles, and cars in the streets, and to regulate coasting, sliding, and the use of velocipedes, bicycles, and tricycles on the sidewalks, which we all know is a common menace. It's therefore no surprise that Evergreen Solutions in their efficiency study recommended that the city establish a charter revision committee to completely revise the charter. To that end, I've invited attorney Stephen Bendick to make a presentation tonight on the legal rationale for a charter revision and the process by which it might be done. Attorney Mendick has been in practice for more than 30 years and concentrates in, among other things, municipal governance, including charter revision and structural reform. He serves as counsel to Westcog, where many of us may know him, and he's also served as counsel to numerous charter revision commissions in the state, some on more than one occasion, including New Haven, Bridgeport, Waterbury, New Britain, Hamden, Fairfield, Cromwell, Darien, and Portland, among others. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Mendick. Thank you, Steve, for being here.
Thank you, Mr. President. My pleasure, Mayor. It's good to see you this evening, and minority leaders. It's a pleasure and honor, and I'm so happy to see you so happy in your chambers. I hope someday to be able to join you in those chambers. I've just gone through 5 charters in the last 2 years, and I've not met a member of any of my 5 commissions except on Zoom. So I look forward to the day when we can get back in a live room and working on these things. President Livingston talked about some archaic provisions in your charter just last night. I was dealing with a small town charter dealing with the regulation of pig pens, and I thought they might actually have some pig pens in the town, but they said absolutely not. It's an archaic provision. We don't need it any longer. So we can go on forever talking about all the archaic provisions and charters. I'm going to talk a little bit, and Mr. President, how much time, because I know you have a heavy agenda, so I don't want to take up too much time.
Well, I think we said about 25, 30 minutes.
Good. Well, I'll try to go quickly, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. I want to talk a little bit about home rule and charters. I have found over the years that a lot of people in government know they're operating under home rule, but are never quite sure what it means. And I just want to point out that the ACIR, the Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations, asked me recently to undertake the drafting of a simple, direct, and readable and explicable definition of home rule. It's really important to really understand that as you enter into a charter revision. It's very important to understand that every time you go to a council meeting. Connecticut's former home rule really has its roots back in the post-Civil War era. Any of the lawyers on the council may know the rule in Dillon's case, which is the foundation for home rule throughout the United States, frankly. And the grounds for home rule are the following. There's three important points. One is that municipal corporations are not sovereigns. The only sovereigns are the United States government and the 50 states in the United States. Municipalities only have those powers that are explicitly granted to them by the legislature, by the state legislature. They only have those powers that are necessarily or fairly implied in or incident to those express grants of powers, and they must all be essential to the declared objects and purposes of the municipality, not simply convenient, but indispensable. Dillon's rule was adopted throughout the United States. It was recognized by the Supreme Court of the United States in the early part of the last century in 1907. And again, that was the concept of the only sovereigns are the federal and state governments. The 1918 Constitution, give you a little lesson here, never mentioned home rule, never really mentioned municipalities. There was virtually no mention of municipal government in the Constitution of 1818. And it wasn't until 1957 that the General Assembly made the rules for local governments by adopting the Home Rule Act. Prior to that time, your charter and many other charters throughout the United States and without the state of Connecticut were adopted by the General Assembly from time to time and just added to by the General Assembly willy-nilly. A mayor would come down and say, I need this power or that power, whatever it is. And no one was really thinking about structure. They were just thinking about authority because otherwise they would have no authority. The Home Rule Act of 1957 changed that. The process that I'm hoping you will be embarking on in the next few months of going to home rule wasn't available prior to 1957. And so they adopted Title VII, which lays out the municipal powers, and they gave government the ability to conduct their own business in their own time, in their own words, in their own charter. And so the idea was the General Assembly wanted to relieve them burden and task of enacting special legislation of local municipal concern. It also gave the municipality, as I said, an opportunity to adopt the Home Rule Charter. Home Rule wasn't the state constitution until 1965. Literally the first time mentioned in the Constitution. But so we don't overblow what it is, Home Rule is basically gives to the General Assembly the right and the authority to establish the powers of local government. So there's no, again, inherent home rule in Connecticut or really in any other state in the United States. You have home rule dealt with differently in the Midwest states, but I won't get into all that. The objective was to move away from the special acts and to move toward a form of local control, local rule. But it's a little bit of a misnomer. It's an artifice, it's a construct. It allows for the orderly operation of local government, but again, only those powers that are granted to you. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One of my charters last year, I went through the process of letting people know how it worked. And I said, you cannot have recall in the state of Connecticut. I argued the case at the Supreme Court. I was a little nervous. Councilman Hubelman had the Supreme Court panel behind him when he started the meeting today, and I got very nervous for whether if I failed to file a brief. But I'm glad he's got a harbor behind him right now. But I argued Simons versus Canty, which basically knocked down recall in the state of Connecticut back in the mid-1980s because there was no express grant of authority for recall. And so you can't do it. You can't do term limits. There's no case on it, but it's the same principle. So I got finished telling my commission that, and somebody said to me, well, Steve, you know that there's a town in Fairfield County that has term limits. And I said, well, either they have a special act, because there are 5 towns in Connecticut that do have recall because they have special act recall, or they made a mistake. And so I called, Mayor Rilling will know the town, and I won't name names, one of his colleagues who I know very well from the COG, and I gave her a call and I asked her about it. And she said, well, why don't you talk to my court counsel? I talked to the court counsel and he agreed with me that it shouldn't be there. Then I talked to the chairman of the Charter Commission, and he said to me, and he's a lawyer in Hartford, not a home rule lawyer, and he said, oh, the law was silent on that, so we thought we could do it. That's not the rule. Silence is not authority. You need an express grant of authority. So that town, a little bit north of you and a little bit east of you, doesn't have term limits. It's on their books, but they don't have it, and they couldn't enforce it. If they went to court, they'd have a big problem. So the reality is that the courts call us creatures of the state, creations of the state. And it basically really has breathed new life into the words of Judge Dillon from way back in the Reconstruction period of our history, that we are a home rule state and we need express grants of authority. And those express grants of authority, when you start putting your charter together, deal with the structure of the charter. You have a mayor council form of government. You have an interesting body with the Board of Estimate, which I really look forward to learning more about, and it really is quite fascinating. There's other towns that are RTM for selectmen forms of government. There's town manager, city manager, council forms of government. So you have express grants of authority to do any number of things. The only actual requirements in a charter is to have a chief executive, the mayor, and to have all of you, the legislative body, the council. The rest of it is all, the structure is all up to you to decide how much structure you want to put in the charter. You also have express grants of authority for the functions of government, all the functional issues that you have, the fiscal issues, budget issues, personnel issues. Let me just stop here for 1 minute, because I think one of the most important personnel issues that people don't think about very often is another form of charter revision. And you're going to ask me, well, gee, what is that? And what it is everybody knows what MIRA is, right? The Municipal Employee Relations Act. That governs collective bargaining. One of the ways I found out when I was a young alder in New Haven, I served on the Board of Alders in New Haven for 10 years as a young man, many, many years ago. But I found out very early on how MIRA worked. And when I was elected to the board, there was twice a week garbage collection. And that was, in fact, an old special act provision in our charter. What I didn't know was shortly after I arrived on the scene as an alder and I voted on my first collective bargaining agreement, that I voted for a collective bargaining agreement that reduced garbage collection to 1 time a week in New Haven. And there's a statute that says that a collective bargaining agreement can trump your charter. So unbeknownst to all of us who voted in favor of that collective bargaining agreement, we had just amended our charter because it does have that superior authority over that. It's a really scary thing, and it's something I beg council members to pay attention to and not make the same mistake I made way back in 1982 or 83 when I voted on my first collective bargaining agreement. And so what is the charter? The charter is your blueprint. It's a document that is designed to establish accountability for the chief executive officer in the administrative functions of city government and to enhance the legislative and oversight functions of the legislative body in the adoption of ordinances, the financing of the government, and the oversight of the administration. And I think that that's really important. I really try to bring my charter commissions, the mayors I work with, the legislative bodies I work with, to have an understanding of what is the proper balance between legislative function and executive function. And I spend a lot of time with some legislators, trying to inculcate the notion of what a legislative role is when you start to encroach on the executive side. And I'm a strong believer in robust local legislative body. The only 10 years of elected life for me, whereas a local elected official. So I really do spend a lot of time thinking about the way your bodies operate in the relationship with the mayor. And so when you review a charter, and I'll talk about yours just very briefly, the president alluded to it earlier, you want to keep an eye on clarity. The public and public officials should be able to look at your charter, read it, navigate it, and understand it. I'm not sure that that is the case right now with the charter that you have. And I think it's really, really important to, if you do nothing else, to really just organize the charter and write it in a way that everybody understands it, because it is your essential constitutional document. Flexibility. I think that the document should be written with broad prescriptions that are basically constitutional prescriptions. Leave the day-to-day governance to you and the mayor through the ordinances, through the budget, through the other actions that can be taken by local government. We may not get there in a first go around on a charter, but I really try to move as many departments out of the charter as possible and move them to the ordinances and to the budget. The mandate for their services should be there. There may be some critical departments that should be in the document, but if you can thin down your charter to move many of the functions of government into the ordinances, you don't have to convene a charter commission and hold a plebiscite, a referendum to change the operation of government. You establish your constitutional principles in the charter. Third point, accountability. The roles should be clear so that the public can hold all of you accountable. That's really, really critical from my perspective. And those three things go together. But here's the last point. And I think, again, I think President Livingston made this point earlier. You want to avoid the culture of disregard or the culture of paralysis. You don't want to have a charter that is so ancient in its language, in its prescriptions, in its confusion in terms of the depth and confusion of the document, that it forces you to disregard the charter. When I was an alder, again, I just want to point this out, I had a terrific corporation counsel in New Haven who argued many cases before the state Supreme Court, the late Charlie Albom. And Charlie would do all sorts of gymnastics in his legal opinions to find a way to get something done, because the language of our ancient charter in the 1980s was led to paralysis, led to roadblocks. And it was always quite interesting. And I was quite critical of him until 7 years later, I became corporation counsel and I became Charlie Albom. So it's you have to really try to have a charter that is easily subject to interpretation, where corporation counsels don't have to do 4 hours of exercise in order to perform the gymnastics you need to get the job done. Just talk about your charter for 1 second. It's spread throughout 23 articles in your charter. There's about 197 pages. You have to get through 63 pages of the taxing districts, and I'm sure they're important, and I will learn everything I can about them when this process starts, if I'm lucky. And you don't get to the city council, to the common council, until roughly page 189, or I'm sorry, section 189 on page 81. And then you don't get to the mayor. The mayor doesn't even have his own chapter, his own article. The mayor is part 2 of Article 5, which deals with officials. And just from the perspective of, you may say, well, it's there, Steve, so what are you worried about? Try finding it, if you're a member of the public, to see what the powers of the mayor are, what the powers of the council are. How does your budget process work? I had to go to 3 or 4 different sections. I was just taking a look. I like to do this. It's like hiking. Going through your budget process to try to figure out the budget process. It's all over the place. It's not in one place. The budget process should be linear. You as members of the council, the board of estimate, the mayor, the members of the public should be able to look at the process and say, this is where it starts and this is where it ends. And you can't do that right now in your charter. And so those are just some of my initial observations that I think just reorganizing will help clarify those issues. So what's the scope of the enterprise when you do a charter revision? The commission itself, you as the appointing authority, and it is the council that is the appointing authority, will basically establish the mission. At the very least, in this charter, you want to have a reorganization. The way you begin to, unless you have preconceptions of what it is you want to do. I've had processes start because they want to change the form of government. I don't think that I've heard anything about that in Norwalk. I think that right now, the issue that I see is structure and organization and modernization. And I think that you begin to develop the philosophy and the focus of the enterprise and the scope of the enterprise through your first public hearing. So what you do is, you have the process where you have to create the commission, which takes 2 meetings. We can talk about that a little bit later. But once the commission is formed, they have their first meeting, and then they have a public hearing. It's at that public hearing that members of the public will come out and they'll express their opinions about anything that they like regarding your charter. We'll get a sense of what the big issues are, if there are any, that people have with the document. The next meeting that I usually advise a commission to hold is with you guys, the mayor and the council, and have individual members of the council, or anybody who want to do it, if you want to do it through your leadership, but to have the members of the council, have the mayor, department heads, others who operate day to day in the arena, to come and talk about their priorities. And we will talk about how to conduct that. So that's step 2 in terms of trying to get a sense of the scope of the enterprise. How many things are we going to have to look at? The third step is what I call a red line exercise. And this is something that I usually do jointly with your corporation counsel. And the Corp Council and I would walk through the charter document. One of the things I've proposed in my proposal to you is that I spend some time over a couple of months before the commission gets up and running to just restructure the charter, reorganize it, so that the members of the commission can actually look at the document in some linear fashion, as linear as we can get that quickly. And so what I would do is I would walk through the document with the Corporation Council, and the Corp Council would point out the day-to-day roadblocks, the day-to-day bumps in the road that are faced in town, and so in the city. So I think it's important because it gives us an ability to understand the functions of government, and it also gives us an ability to decide what kind of document do you want to have. Do you want to have a micromanagement tool or a constitution? If you look at your next door neighbor, Stanford, they have a real, what I think is a heavily codified micromanagement document. And I think that I try to move people in the direction of a constitutional document for the reasons I said earlier. I won't repeat them, to give you the ability in real time to do the business of government. So again, it's a tricky assignment. There's no inherent powers. There's no implied powers. We have to be mindful of Title VII. We have to be mindful, I talked about this a minute ago, of MIRA and collective bargaining agreements. And so what happens is you will appoint the commission. They'll go through the hearing process. You have to be careful, and we'll talk about this before you appoint them, to make sure that no more than 1/3 of your commission holds public office, and not more than a bare majority of any party controls the commission. You have your public hearing requirements for the commission. And once you're done with the public hearing, your meetings with the mayor and the council and the red line process, the 4th meeting, or maybe the 5th meeting, depending on how much due diligence we have, is when the commission will actually see the list of things that people are interested in. And then they'll make decisions about what to pursue and how to pursue it. In my more recent years, I have worked closely with the council while the commission is in the field. A lot of commissioners say, well, we're independent. We could do whatever we want. And I say to them, that is absolutely correct. You can do anything you want, but if you don't have the votes in the council, when you complete your project, then you'll have a wonderful document that you could look at 40 years from now from the retirement home and think about the wonderful things you did that were not effective. And so I try to inculcate in the leadership of the commission a close relationship with the leadership of the council, to try to keep the council apprised of the process. In some towns, depending on the size of the commission, and we could talk about that, usually try to have bipartisan members of the council, at least one of each party on a commission. If it's a larger commission, the better for that. This is a project that might require a larger commission because I think it's going to be a substantial project. I don't like to have overtly political people on them. I don't like that, but it's up to you, not up to me. But I think it's important to have an important relationship with the council. So a year from now, roughly a year from where we are right now, I'm finishing up 3 charters right now. Over the next 6 weeks, we will be in the place where the commission will be running to the end of the race and trying to get the document into the council. Once they send the document to you, you have up to 60 days. I usually try to monitor the process to see whether, and I'll be talking to the leadership of the council to get a sense, are you going to need the full 60 days? Because I want to try to keep the document with the commission as long as I can, because that's where you have maximum capacity to do things. So if there's things that need to be negotiated, I usually like to take care of it before it goes to the council. Once it goes to you, you can raise questions. You can either approve the document because you think it's terrific, or if you have questions, you meet with the commission and you present your questions back to the commission. It will go back to them for up to 30 days, and then they come back to you only on the issues you raised with them. And then you get to vote up or down, in whole or in part. And if you approve any part of it or all of it, your next task as a council is to develop your questions for the ballot. And the real deadline is to get these questions into the Secretary of State's office by the first week in September of next year. And then it goes to the referendum. It's a majority vote in a referendum. If you are in a general election, which this would be planned for, there's no minimal requirement. If you were having a special election, you need to have 15% of the voting population vote. That's kind of the process. I won't talk about me at all. I'll talk about, there's legal advice I give, there's research. The president participated in one of my workshops for one of my commissions. One of the things I try to do with commissions, and I'll tell you the one good thing about the pandemic and Zoom is that people really didn't have to travel. I used to have to fly people in who are experts. I can now Zoom them in, and that works out much better. I try to give the commission members a sense of how the world works, how things are going in Danbury or Hartford or New Britain, and bring real live practitioners in who are doing the same things they're doing, but operating under different charters to get a sense of how certain provisions work, whether you're dealing with police commissions or budgets or whatever it may be. And that's what I do. And then my last task is trying to facilitate the deliberations and the interactions the way I described a few moments ago. And so with that, I hope I didn't take too much time, Mr. President. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions?
Yeah, I have one.
Mr. Wilson?
I think there are 2 things, and I think, by the way, first of all, thank you for an incredibly thorough presentation. I think there are 2 things that I can think of that seem to be sort of have the most clarity. One being that it's a document that anyone can read that is not too much legalese. And I want to get your thoughts on that. And second, in your experience, what is a city whose charter you think is both modern and something that we can see as sort of comparable to where you think we should try and end up? Obviously, there are differences between towns and that are 25,000 people and cities that are like Norwalk that have 90,000 people. So I guess I'm looking for what is a comparable charter that we can look at as we begin undergo this process and say, this is kind of the idea of where we would like to be.
Thank you. That's a great question, Councilmember Goldstein, and I appreciate it. First, let's talk about legalese. My law professor, Lenny Orland at UConn Law School, taught me how to write. I don't think I ever knew how to write until I took his antitrust course. And he talked about compression and simplicity because I was a typically verbose young legal type who thought that flowery language meant something, and it probably meant something to Douglas Fairbanks, but it didn't mean much to the average voter or anybody. And so I try to write my contract simply. So I try to do as much as I can to compress the document. There may be restrictions to rewrite, and we're gonna have to look at this thing. To rewrite your charter would be a massive undertaking. So I can't guarantee that every word in the document will be changed. And there may be special act provisions, and that's what we have to look at with your document, that will need to remain in place because otherwise you won't have the authority. If there are things that are granted to you in the special act, I'd be remiss. It'd be like cutting off one of your fingers and have 4 fingers on your hand instead of 5. Even though the finger was pretty ugly, it may serve a purpose at some point. So I do want clarity. I like things that are linear, and I find it enormously helpful to do it. And I'm a little selfish here because I do comparative analysis, to go to your second question, in all my charter revisions. And so I very often look at Norwalk because you're in a size that is comparable to the big cities. So I look at you when I'm looking at my big city charters, but I also look at you when I'm looking at charters in towns that are 60 and 80,000 people. I look at you now because I'm doing Fairfield right now and Hamden. Those are the 11th and 12th largest municipalities in Connecticut. The comparable charter, and I'm not going to say it's perfect, was the charter I worked on in Waterbury. Because if you look at it, you will see that there are still ancient provisions in there, but you'll also see where we modernize the document. So there's a little bit of a disconnect, and they haven't brought me back to do the remainder. Hartford, I am just finishing my 4th charter in Hartford, and finally, after 4 charters, I got rid of a huge 100 pages of special acts. And we finally felt confident that those special acts did not apply to anybody. Or it's a little misleading. We didn't fully get rid of them. What I did is created a new code of special act provisions out of the charter with a link to the charter, with a special act link to the charter, to make sure if somehow a survivor of the Spanish-American War is still around, we can cover them. That's the kind of thing I was talking about. But I took over 100 pages if that charter is adopted in November. So it's sometimes a incremental process. I started Hartford's 20 years ago. I'm not sure I'll be here 20 years from now, but you'll have a lot of other young lawyers to take my place 20 years from now to finish the job that we may start this year. But I think Waterbury you can look to, because you'll see the structural changes, and Hartford, because I restructured both those charters in 2002. So they're both, I think, in pretty good shape in that regard. New Haven to some extent. The other one that I've done most of my work on is Hamden, and I'll be more than happy to share. And we're going through that process right now. We're really finishing the work we started 10 years ago on the Hamden charter. So I think those are good, and they're good because they're linear. But you're going to find they're all a little different because every town is different. And so I don't come in and pretend to understand Norwalk at all. I've been to Norwalk. I've been to theater in Norwalk. I used to buy sweaters at Decker's when it was around. Came down from New Haven to buy my sweaters, but I don't pretend to understand the culture, the folk waves, or the politics. I'll leave that up to you and the members of the commission to guide me to make sure we don't go places we shouldn't go in the charter process. But I think if you look at those charters, you get a good feel for a good linear charter. The best one I did was Bridgeport, but that lost 10 years ago in the referendum. So it over a miscue on the structure of the Board of Education, which killed the whole charter, unfortunately. But that was a really terrific reorganization that was done down there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kides?
Thanks, Tom. We've been through this charter revision before, and we, after all the effort, nearly nothing we recommended got passed by the public. And then during that process, we learned that pretty much all the questions we asked of the public to vote on was asked in the past and also failed. I'm wondering if you had any feedback or any kind of percentage of how many of these initiatives and all these municipalities you're working with have actually successfully passed the charter revision that they've requested of the constituents.
Well, I can tell you, I have a reasonably good record, but I just told you Bridgeport lost. All three of my charters in New Britain were adopted because what I tried to do at Hartford, we adopted two last time. One was killed in the council. I think this one will do reasonably well. Waterbury's passed. Camden, we passed 10 years ago. A year ago, it lost at the council over a political dispute. New Haven's charter passed. As I said, Bridgeport did not. Middletown, we just had a very successful charter, tackled a lot of issues. That passed last November. East Windsor, they did. Portland, I've lost two charters, never got to the voters. They died in the legislative body. And so, you know, it's a pretty decent record. And what I try to do, council member, is one, get a sense from the political players what issues will be problematic. And if we can avoid them, we avoid them. If we have to tackle them, if they're central issues, then it really becomes a big part of the education process. The other thing is I tell commissioners is that if you sign on to this, your job doesn't end when the council approves your work. You really should form a political action committee, a bipartisan political action committee, hopefully, and work on educating the public so that people don't forget about it. I'm always worried, every charter, I worry that it's going to lose because somebody may demagogue against an issue or no one will pay attention to the issue. And so I can't tell you that it's 100%, but it's a better batting average than people in the major leagues who make a lot more money than I do. It's, you know, we do I've been pretty lucky in the way that we've done it. No guarantees on anything. And I've had a couple serious disappointments never within the commission itself. It's usually been politics at the council has crushed charters.
I would love to see, you know, something on paper personally about, you know, your experiences and what's passed and what hasn't. I mean, obviously some of the more lighthearted items are going to pass, get approved by the public than the more, you know, I guess, game-changing items. But I definitely would love to see some data on, you know, that you've gathered over the years during this process of what's passed and what has not. And I think that'll be a learning experience for all of us to, you know, move forward and, you know, don't set our expectations too high, but yet, you know, kind of push ahead.
Well, thank you very much. And I'll be happy. I'll talk to the president about that. I'd be happy to.
Thanks.
I've had some fairly major things pass. I mean, Hartford, we went from city manager to strong mayor. That's a pretty big change. I've had a number of 4-year terms pass, very difficult issues in some towns. We've avoided them in other towns. New Haven has never tackled the 4-year term. So we've made those kinds of judgments, but they've passed in other places. So as I say, Bridgeport lost over the Board of Education. And we could talk about that sometime. So there are issues you want to be careful about. Thank you.
Any other questions, discussion?
You mentioned the public education piece, and I'm just wondering if you could speak briefly as to the kind of public education that you think is necessary to move like this forward.
Thank you. It's nice seeing you again. Two things. One is something that can be done statutorily that doesn't require the raising of money politically. A lot of towns don't know this, but you can do an explanatory text under the statutes that the municipality can pay for. It's not a partisan document, and it's not a argumentative document. It's a factual document that lays out for the voters what has changed in each section of the charter, how you have made those changes and where they are in the charter. So that's number one. That's done by the town clerk working with the corporation council. And I usually provide some assistance in putting that document together. And it varies from town to town. I've always encouraged my commissioners to write op-eds. A lot of my charters took place before social media. So I now encourage people to go on social media and advocate for the document. I also encourage them to do it in teams. I work very hard in communities to make sure that both that the minority and majority parties and maybe third parties that might exist in the community on the Charter Commission work together. So I always try to have, if it's a conventional Republican Democrat split, to have a Republican and a Democrat write an op-ed together, and try to do that, because I think it's very important to try to do it that way. Most of the charters I've been involved with avoid assiduously the partisan divide, and we try very hard to overcome that divide by just encouraging people to talk and reminding them that this is your local constitution. And I'm not saying that if you read our history, we know that the founding fathers and mothers were not all pure. They were just human beings like the rest of us. But I think we should try to act like the myth when we do charter revision. We really try to act like we understood it in history, that this was a white week moment, and this is important for our town, our city, and we try to work on these things. So I occasionally volunteer. No one pays me to do that, but I will volunteer to help people out when they're doing their op-eds, radio shows, local cable access, Zoom meetings now that can be done, but to encourage people to do that and make sure they have palm cards and make sure somebody try to get the support of both parties if you can. Doesn't work out all the time, and to make sure that a palm card is being handed out for the charter, depending on the number of questions. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Any other, Mr. Holman?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Mednick, thank you so much. I could listen to you talk about civics for hours here, and I'm a geek out that way. It's fantastic. I have a question on you talk about the fact that, our charter is early 20th century, lots of idiosyncratic parts of it that we would be looking at and reorganizing and restructuring. And do you look at doing something like that for the first time with a charter like ours, with this municipality, in broad strokes? Because you see, it seems to sound that you've done this a number of times with charters in different places. You get one document of the Constitution or one form moving, and then we come back a number of years later and refine that and refine it. Is that sort of how this long-term process that we would be looking at?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. And I would love to talk about civics with you some other time as well. But what I try to do with an old document, look, New Haven has 19th century provisions. So you're pretty modern compared to New Haven. I love New Haven. I serve New Haven. So I can say these things. What I try to do, and this is what I have suggested that I do at the beginning, is to take what you got and develop a proper structure. How a charter opens up, what how the election process works, how the legislative process works, the mayor's responsibilities, the departments, boards and commissions, budget, and try to pull the current provisions as they are without changing a word into a organized structure. As we then look at the chapters, as we look at the election provisions, we will see some special act provisions. And one of the things I will do is talk to your corporation counsel and your town clerk and find out, do you use these provisions in your elections, or do you operate your elections solely under Title IX? How do you do it? If you're going solely under Title IX, my recommendation is get rid of every special act provision. Now, if you have recall, which you don't, if you had term limits, which you don't, things that you can't adopt on your own, keep those things. But if they're something you don't need, let's deal with it. I see this a lot in assessment provisions and in a lot of other things that are in charters. And so what I try very often to do in a first run on a charter is to make sure that the day-to-day powers are as clear as they can be. if there are some special act provisions, I usually put them in the back of the chapter or create a separate chapter or section for them to preserve them and come back another day to take a look at them, whether it's me or the Corp Counsel or some law students that you bring in to look at them. So I try to do as much as I can in a first run, but we're only going to have, let's say you form the commission in July, in August, and that's good because September is a good time to start. It's not a lot of time. That's 4 months in this year and 5 months at the beginning of next year. And while I'm going to segregate a lot of things in those first couple of months before they come in, we're not going to have time to answer every legal question. So you're absolutely right. It will require something in the future. 10 years ago, I'd be thrilled because it would probably be me, but I don't know, 10 years from now, I'm going to be doing this. But it does set up the town, the city, to a place where it can then tackle those issues independently.
Is part of this process then working with you? Do you help us to, amongst ourselves, manage those expectations, but how to message that management of expectation to the public so that we're moving everybody along on the journey together?
Yeah, I work hard with my commissions to, especially in the day of Zoom, where most of the public is watching. If they're doing anything, they're watching us on the electronic media, and we continue to have hybrid meetings. That will continue. I always remind everybody of our limitations and what we may not be able to get done, and make it very clear, even during the public hearing process. One of the things I didn't talk about, I didn't want to get into the weeds. I keep a public comment chart. Basically, every comment that comes into the commission gets logged. And then when we lay out our priorities, we actually follow their chart to the priority to make sure that we follow it. Some point in the process, and we're getting to that point with two of my charters right now, we're starting to triage, and we're trying to and saying to people, these are not going to be addressed. There's no time to address them. We try to start doing it early enough in the process so that if there's real pushback, we can gauge it and make a determination whether we should reverse in order to not have an issue that could be harmful politically to the charter, or to simply persuade them there's another way to do it. One of the other things I do, I'm giving an example, real life example that's going on in one of my cities right now, and that is a group came to us and they said, oh, we'd like to have our commission in the charter. And as I told you, I think at the beginning of this process, I like to move commissions out of charters. I'd like to make them all ordinance-based commissions and mandate them, if it's important, constitutionally mandate it so the council has to create the commission. And if it's in the charter, don't let it sunset until a new commission is formed so that that happens. So one of the ways that we're dealing with it, because we are running out of time, is I'm recommending that we're not going to create the commission in the charter, but we will mandate it in the charter. So you've given them something that the charter commission has looked at it, didn't have time to focus on it, but is saying to the legislative body, we think this commission should be created. It's up to you now to create it. And so there's different ways of managing expectations. My hope is that we'll have a strong leadership, a chair and vice chair of the commission. That's a huge, be very discriminating in terms of the kind of leadership you put together on the commission, in terms of just having really talented, bright folks, and that your chair and vice chair will be the face of the commission. I have no vote. I can try to guide the commission, but ultimately the chair and the vice chair are the people working with the leadership of your body that will be laying out the expectations and really setting the course, and I will help guide them on that. So I spend a lot of time on expectations.
Thank you. Appreciate the answer.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Steve, so much for being here tonight. We really appreciate your very thorough and quite impressive presentation. Just to move on, I think as Attorney Mendick said, we have a massive undertaking here in revising the charter. I think, quite frankly, our past experience has shown that we really do need to do this right. In my mind, doing it right means hiring somebody like Mr. Mendick, who has the experience, the history of doing this. And with that, I'd like to make a motion to authorize the Corporation Council to retain Attorney Stephen Mendick to provide legal counsel to the city, to advise the Common Council and the Charter Revision Commission in connection with the potential revision of the city charter. I've made a motion. Is there any discussion, comments? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Mendick.
Thank you. I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you very much.
Steve.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you at Westcog.
All right.
I'll be there.
Moving on. Tonight's consent calendar. We've now reached it. Will be read by Mr. Keegan.
A monumental task in and of itself. Six, reports, departments, boards, and commissions. A, Corporation Council. 1, authorization for discussion, Matthew Fort et al. Versus ZBA City of Norwalk, DNFST CV 22-6055059S, appeal of ZBA approval for Cranberry School application 12 Noah Lot Lane. Subsection 7, Common Council Committees. A, Public Safety and General Government Committee. 1A, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all documents necessary to enter into an agreement with Motorola Solutions, Inc. for the supply, installation, and service of the CLRMN add-on communication system upgrade for State of Connecticut Master Contract A99-001 and 967-A-23-0338C for the amount not to exceed $5,561,994. Account noted. Authorize the police chief, Thomas Koholick, to execute any and all documents, change orders with Motorola Solutions, Inc. for the supply, installation, and service of the CLRMN add-on communication systems upgrade not to exceed $556,199. Account noted. 2, authorize the purchasing agent, Sharon Connors, to issue a purchase order to Purvis for the purchase and installation of an overhead paging software system at all 5 fire stations and apparatus maintenance not to exceed $550,000. Account noted. 3, authorize the purchasing agent, Sharon Connors, to issue a purchase order to L&L Electronics of Branford, Connecticut for the purchase and installation of updated Raymarine Navionics Coast Guard compliant and offers programmed SAR patterns with encrypted communications. The purchase order is not to exceed $32,999 from account noted. Funding from FEMA Port Security Grant EMW 2020 PU 00449 S01 for FD Marine Boat 238 in parenthesis DC Prescott. Economic and Community Development Committee. 1, approve the 2022-2023 capital budget of the City of Norwalk and modifications as outlined in the attached memo. C, Public Works Committee. 1, technical correction of the Common Council action of April 13th, 2021, item Roman numeral 7C5 to add accounts designated for the Walk Bridge Program 0301-0515 NP project, including the PAL enclosed with this agenda, whereby the City of Norwalk will transfer funds in the amounts of $3,750,000 on May 30th, 2021, $1,875,000 on July 1st, 2022, and $1,875,000 on July 1st, 2023, fund the undergrounding of utility lines on East Avenue from Fort Point Street to Olmsted Place to be performed by CONDOT Account noted. 2, authorize the purchasing agent to issue a purchase order to Gabrielli Truck Sales of Milford for the purchase of one 2023 Mack GR42F plow truck for an amount not to exceed $265,043. Account noted. 3, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute an acknowledgement and consent to the assignment and assumption of a certain license agreement dated July 8th, 1982, for retaining wall located at 27 Soundview Avenue. Said assignment and assumption by and between Kepler Dory and Marguerite Dory as assignors, and Jennifer Mager and Dylan Sauerwald as assignees. Number 4, technical correction of the Common Council action December 14th, 2021. Item Roman numeral 7D, 7A to add accounts designated by Kelowna Concrete and Asphalt Paving LLC for project DRG 2021-1, Dreamy Hollow, Bettsbrook area drainage, sanitary sewer and water main improvements, account numbers noted. Technical correction of the Common Council action December 14th, 2021. Item 7, Roman numeral 7D, 7B to add accounts designated for Kelowna Concrete and Asphalt Paving LLC for project DRG 2021-1, Dreamy Hollow, Bettsbrook area drainage, sanitary sewer and water main improvements, account numbers noted. 6, technical correction of the Common Council action October 12, 2021, items Roman numeral 7B, 7 to add accounts designated for Woodard and Current to provide an on-call professional engineering services for the storm drainage systems evaluation, Glendenning Street, account number noted. Number 7, technical correction of the Common Council action October 12, 2021, item Roman numeral 7B8 to add accounts designated for Woodard and Current to provide on-call professional engineering services for the storm drainage system evaluation, Glenwood Avenue, account number noted. 8, technical correction of the Common Council action December 14th, 2021, item Roman numeral 7D8 to add accounts designated for Woodard and Current to provide construction administration services associated with Dreamy Hollow, Bettsbrook area drainage, sanitary sewer and water main improvements, account numbers noted. Number 9, technical correction of the Common Council action February 8th, 2022, item Roman numeral 7C1 to add accounts designated for Tig and Bond Incorporated for professional engineering services for project 4177/DRG 2022-1 design and permitting for Lockwood Lane and Heather Lane storm drainage improvements, account number noted. Number 10, technical correction of the Common Council action September 14th, 2021, item Roman numeral 7C4 to add accounts designated for Olmsted Tree and Shrub Care Company LLC for the supply of planting trees and shrubs, account number noted. 11, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute a 6th amendment to the August 28, 2007 agreement for professional engineering services between the city of Norwalk and A. DeCesar Associates, PC, regarding the East Avenue reconstruction project for an amount not to exceed $100,000 in accordance with the attached scope of services. Date, March 30th, 2022, account noted. Number 12, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to concur with project authorization construction letter dated March 30th, 2022, and issued by the State of Connecticut Department of Transportation for State Project 102-360, traffic signal upgrades and installation of dynamic message systems. D, land use and building management. 1A, resolved that the Norwalk Land Use and Building Management Committee of the Norwalk Common Council is hereby established as the school building committee with regard to the Rhoton Middle School asbestos abatement project. 1B, resolved that the Norwalk Common Council hereby authorizes at least the preparation of schematic drawings, cost estimate, and outline specifications for the Rhoton Middle School asbestos abatement project. 1C, resolved that the City of Norwalk Common Council authorizes the City of Norwalk Board of Education to apply to the Commissioner of Administration Services and to accept or reject a grant for the Rhoton Middle School asbestos abatement project. 3, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute an amendment to Construction Solutions Group LLC's program management services agreement by reassigning the free balances available from the new Columbus School at Ely site and Columbus School Global Academy projects purchase orders to the new Sono School project for a total not to exceed $60,464.01. Account noted. 4A, resolved that the Norwalk Land Use and Building Management Committee of the Norwalk Common Council is hereby established as the school building committee with regard to the new South Norwalk Sono School project. 4B, resolved that the Norwalk Common Council hereby authorizes at least the preparation of schematic drawings and outline specifications for the new Sono School project. 4C, resolved that the City of Norwalk Common Council authorizes the Norwalk Board of Education to apply to the Commissioner of Administrative Services and to accept or reject a grant for the new Sono School project. 6, authorize the purchasing agent to increase the purchase order for Special Testing Laboratories, Inc. for materials testing and field inspection services for the Jefferson Elementary School Renovators New project for an additional amount not to exceed $30,000. Funds are available in account noted. 7, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute an agreement with Luriano Engineering Associates, Inc. for the purposes of performing Phase 2 environmental investigation services for an amount not to exceed $55,000 and executing any and all other documents necessary in order for Lorero to perform said services. Account noted. And that's consent.
Thank you, Mr. Keegan. A long one tonight. I will say that I think you read one that was off consent, which is item B1. That has to do with the capital budget. That should be off consent.
Oh, okay.
One last thing.
My apologies.
No problem. If there's no discussion, I'll call for a vote on acceptance of the consent calendar as read. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. First item off the consent is item 7A4, Ms. McMurray.
Yes, 7A4 is the approval of revised voting districts of polling places for state and federal even year elections. And with us, we have Mr. Stuart Wells to speak to this item and answer any questions.
If you can hear me, I'm here.
Yep, we can hear you.
All right. I'm sorry. Are you looking for a speech or I'm answering questions?
No.
A speech.
I would love a speech from you, Mr. Wells, but not tonight.
Probably not.
If you want to just give a brief description of why this change is happening, that would be great. And that way we can open it up to any questions.
Oh, certainly. Well, the census happened a year and a half ago, and according to that, they redistricted the state legislative districts. And in simple terms, they put a new district in Wilton, which shoved Wilton's part of the 143rd district into Norwalk, moving the 142nd around sort of counterclockwise. And so all our districts got adjusted, and as they always do on these kinds of things. And so we now have 4 districts that are almost completely in Norwalk, and of course, one now smaller piece of the 141st in Rowayton. So we tried to find precinct. Those lines are created by the legislature. Our job was to create district precinct lines, if you were, where the individual voting areas are covered. And we were able to do that with portions of the city in approximately the same size and with fairly logical lines, where we were able to use I-95 for a dividing line between precincts effectively, also Westport Avenue and the East Avenue and extension and so forth in 143. Obviously, some of the districts changed, and we weren't able to use, say, the Super 7 connector because the legislature picked that one. And so we have districts that are manageable, the proper sizes, but we need the 3 voting precincts in each of them because otherwise they'd be too big for the parking lots at the schools and for proper management of them. So we're proposing 1 extra polling place. We have the same number for municipal elections now. But, and we've had more in the past with differently strange redistrictings if someone ever came by to see the old maps. Other than that, your job is to pass the new lines or adjust them or whatever, and then within them, we would pick the polling places. Although in general, it's collaborative because we have to have districts in mind that have polling places in them, and that makes sense in that regard. The change would be that Roten, which is no longer in the 141st, would not be used going forward in any elections. It's not used municipally now. They would go back to using Roten for the 141st. And that area was expanded in the 142nd, so we'd use Brookside for that. Otherwise, they're the same polling places as before, that you're largely pretty much familiar with one exception. We want to look into using the library instead of St. Mary's because it may require now and in the future some city money to improve internet, and if electronic poll books were coming someday. They might need infrastructure for that. And we're not certain the rules on putting city money into church property. We have no complaints about the way St. Mary's has treated us over the years. We would just prefer, it might be safer to try city property instead. But that we still have to look into the feasibility of that, including the permanence of parking and so forth. Also going forward, of course, you're changing or doing some things in South Norwalk with the Nathaniel Ely Odyssey area and the Columbus school area. I understand at the moment we can use them, but of course we can't guarantee that forever either. So there's some things to work out going forward. And lastly, and unrelated precisely to this, you're putting in a lot of security improvements. We'd love to have access to those camera feeds from the gyms to broadcast elections in progress. We do that now, but the camera feeds are not the best for what we can bring in and just set up. Does that cover anybody's questions, or what can I do?
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Wells? I don't see any on the screen.
There I do.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Wells, I know that in South Norwalk, in particular at Columbus School, there was always an issue about accessibility. And so I think as we're just, thinking how things will change in South Norwalk, that's going to be an issue, is the accessibility into the buildings, particularly since a lot of the buildings in South Norwalk are older. And that is going to require some thought about how we find another location. I'm just putting that out there because that has been.
Finding another, we've thought about what other locations might be available, and we haven't come up with a really good plan. We would love to improve the current access to Columbus as well. The best way we figured to do it would be to extend the platform of the ramp and platform that goes into the kitchen a little bit farther over to you and to use the hallway, the sort of coach's hallway that leads directly into the gym. That would work better than what we now have. But there are other areas with slight improvements would make a big difference in handicap accessibility and safety issues. We would like to go directly into the gyms instead of through doors and common areas, because at primaries, the schools aren't closed. And even on election day, when they are closed, we don't have much track of voters, where they go, what they might be doing, sneaking off into some other part of the building. These are all kinds of issues we'd love to avoid with a certain number of modest improvements in getting into the gyms.
Any further questions, Ms. Young?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Any further questions from anybody? Thank you, Mr. Wells. For that, we'll call a vote on item 7A4. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. That brings us to item 7B1, Mr. Kites.
Thanks, Mayor. Item B1, approve the 2022 to 2023 capital budget of the city of Norwalk with modifications as outlined in the attached memo. I'd like to move it and speak to it briefly, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Kites.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I'll keep this brief. I want to just, give a big thanks to city staff for putting a tremendous amount of work over the last year structuring this budget. It really shows, and I think that the public are really going to see these changes and what this funding could do for them beyond the usual of just paving and purchasing of vehicles. There's a lot of initiatives that have been approved for funding, if that hopefully passes tonight, and I'm very optimistic on what we're going to see in the next year following that approval. So thank you to you all, and thank you to the members of the council and individual committees. And I mean, I've been through quite a few of these, and I can tell you this by far was the most exciting one to see. There's been a lot of work, a lot of things happening behind the scenes, and a lot of planning, which these budgets often take a lot of planning. So great to see these things, and hopefully it gets approved tonight and moves on. Thank you. Oh, and just quickly, Mr. Mayor, if I may also just make mention that we're going to be, as the courtesy, Mr. Burnett, the chairman of the Finance and Claims Committee, will be giving the committee and the council an update on basically a financial status of if this budget's approved, where we stand financially, and AAA bond rating, and all those such things. So I look forward to that meeting and hearing what our financial CFO and others have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kites. Mr. Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to comment on Councilman Kites' last comment, yes, that we will have a presentation at the May finance meeting, as well as bringing that presentation to the council in May as it relates to the update on the city's debt service. And so our CFO, along with our financial consultant, Bill Lindsay, will be providing that update. But Mr. Mayor, I raised my hand to bring forward a modification to the committee's recommendation as it relates to the capital budget. During the review with the various departments, it was brought to our attention that under line item C0665 for the police department, that 3 of the unmarked vehicles were taken out of the capital budget. And during that discussion, the chief shared several points that at least surfaced with me as being of concern. One, the average mileage of the unmarked vehicles for the police department is currently at approximately 80,000 miles. 2, that there's currently practically a 30-month supply chain delay in terms of getting new vehicles. which would basically, even if we approve this now, we wouldn't see these vehicles till 2024. This is for an opportunity to consider looking at a hybrid vehicle as opposed to a totally gas vehicle for these unmarked vehicles. And also the fact that even though 3 unmarked vehicles were requested, the chief did share that 2 would be more than suffice to address the needs of the police department. The vehicles would be rotated down to other units within the police department. So it's not as if these vehicles would not continue to be utilized within the city of Norwalk. So with that, the cost for the 2 unmarked vehicles would be $112,000. I would recommend through a motion, if in order, that that $112,000 come out of line item C0313 under the fleet replacement budget, which currently shows $995,000, and that would be reduced down to $883,000. And then line item C0665 would increase from $719,887 to $831,877 to accommodate 2 new unmarked cars for the police department.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. Any discussion on that motion? Amendment, I'm sorry, Mr.
Well, I have a question. If we're taking the money, well, two question or comment, actually. First, if we're taking the money away from the fleet, what are we taking it away from? I mean, that the budget was put together based on a specific list of vehicles Public Works wanted to purchase. So what are we taking away from Public Works?
You're asking specifically what are we taking away from? I'm making the recommendation to reduce that budget for fleet replacement so that we can possibly reassess that $112,000 as it relates to the items that would come forward out of the fleet replacement budget.
Well, I guess my question is, I understand and I support the police vehicles. My concern is that that budget was put together based upon Public Works ongoing fleet replacement program. So they have designated those funds to specific vehicles. So if we take $112,000 away, it's necessarily coming from something. And
if I understand the process correctly, all these numbers are estimates. They're not as if we have gone out and received RFPs for any of these line items. This is just a plan, it's estimates. And I'm hoping that once they go out and do the necessary estimates, even with the $112,000 for the 2 unmarked vehicles, it could very well possibly come in at a lower number, especially if we look at hybrid vehicles. So all of these numbers are just estimates. They're not hard and fast numbers as if we have defined estimates on the exact amount that will be spent. They're all, in my opinion, estimates at this point. So I'm anticipating that out of practically $1 million line item, we can find $100,000 for these 2 unmarked vehicles.
Okay, I will just one last comment. I won't support this. I don't know what the implications are. And I will note that hybrid vehicles tend to be more expensive than regular gas powered vehicles. Plus, I'd like to spend a year to really research the hybrid or electric, if possible, vehicle and go at this with a plan to put in either a charging station or some such thing at the police department and do this right in my mind. So I'm not going to support it. Thank you.
Any, Mr. Smith?
Yes, thank you. I would not be able to support this amendment either because as chair of the Public Works Committee, I have had some conversations with leadership of the department, and I am well aware that every dollar is needed for their vehicles. So I can't support it.
Further comment or discussion? Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Perhaps this is a question, especially to you, Chair Burnett, because of finance. In the line item under community services, on page 1 of 3 of the budget, there is a line for a library van, was not approved, but it says coordinate with fleet services. So my question would be specifically as the services committee, could it be possible that can you all hear me, the math? Yeah, cool, thank you. It would be possible that this would affect the ability for the library to get a van if we're depending on fleet services to provide that new van. Because they've been, we all know kind of the state of the van of the library. And we would like to think about replacing that too, perhaps, Is that a concern?
I'm sorry, I barely heard what you said.
Oh, all right.
The concern is on the first page of community services.
Right.
The fleet van, the library van.
I'll lean in here, Greg. Yeah, so
I'm not sure how the library van relates to what I just brought forward related to the unmarked vehicles.
Well, no, my question is just, like, it says coordinate with fleet services, so there may be a chance, in my mind, I'm not sure, that it's possible we could get a library van out of the line item that you're wanting to take that $100-some thousand out of. So I'm thinking if we give it to the police cars, does that mean that we are already like out of a library van?
I will defer that question to the Chair of Public Works, Councilmember Smith, who just commented that she's had comments with DPW as it relates to the $995,000. And so I'll defer that question.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can't answer specifically other than to say that I know that, they have put the budget together with specific trucks that they need to operate, to conduct operations for the city. And so, I would just say the same thing that I said to Mr. Burnett.
Okay. Yes, where I'm sitting, I do want, and we even in our committee meeting said, hey, chief, we'd like to get you an electric vehicle to pilot. So that's my end goal, right? I'm trying in my mind to think about if this amendment you're proposing, Greg, helps achieve that goal, but also when I'm thinking about the library being able to be somehow squeaking by, maybe if this coordinate with fleet services is what I hope it is, that's just as a comment, I'm just trying to figure out how this could all shake down for that. Thank you.
Mr. Keegan.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This is a question for anyone to answer. My question is, in the event that Chief Koholik's needs for 2 unmarked police vehicles becomes an emergency situation, or the van itself for the library breaks down, is there a process for the department heads to go somewhere to get emergency funding that's needed for these kinds of items?
It would be a special capital appropriation if
Okay,
necessary.
and that can be done.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also want to mention, these cars that we're talking about are driven by the chief and the 2 deputies. And what will happen is they want to take the cars that they've been driving, send them down to the undercover, not undercover, but the detective unit, special victims unit, and the cars that we would buy would go to the chief and deputy chiefs.
Right. But in response to what Councilman Burnett was saying about 30 months out, they got 80,000 miles on them now. If there was an emergency need for vehicles, there is a process for department heads to find the funding if they're needed, right?
They could always come to the BET for a special appropriation.
Okay.
And also, and again, I totally support the police department. I always have. The vehicles we're talking about are full-size Ford Explorers. And it might not necessarily be necessary to buy that big of a vehicle or that expensive of a vehicle if we needed another vehicle for an emergency purpose.
Okay, thank you.
I'm trying to see, I apologize, Mr. Kites, I apologize, I haven't been looking at the screen. So Mr. Kites?
That's all right. That's all right. I understand I'm the outcast. Do we have anyone on from DPW right now? Do we have, I guess Anthony's on vacation. Do we have Chris or anybody else?
I don't see anybody
Doesn't
here.
look like it.
No?
I don't.
Okay. And just point of information, Mr. Mayor, you had mentioned these two cars, or the three cars are for the deputy chief and for Chief Kohalik?
Well, I don't know. They're asking for two vehicles. I believe the chief said that he would forego a new vehicle and the two vehicles would go to the deputy chiefs. And then the vehicles that they're currently driving would be placed either with the Detective Bureau Special Victims Unit or some other non-uniformed function.
I see Deputy Chief Zecca here with us tonight. Hi. Do you mind maybe kind of giving us some insight on this?
Yeah, ultimately, our vehicles have roughly 80,000 miles on them. What we had developed an unmarked fleet plan, which we've been trying to follow, but we had these vehicles in the budget for last year in our plan, and they were not approved. So we got no unmarked vehicles last year. So having no unmarked vehicles a second year in a row really obviously puts us well behind in our plan to keep our fleet in operational condition, because our vehicles would then get passed down to the investigative services divisions, who are now have some very old vehicles that are not in such great shape.
Okay, so it sounds like the need isn't so much to get the chiefs the nice new fancy cars, it's more so to get your old cars down to where they're needed.
Correct. Yes, it's about making sure that we have proper serviceable vehicles in all of our unmarked divisions, which is basically mostly our investigative services divisions.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Chief Zecca.
Ms. McMurray.
Deputy Chief Zecca, could you answer a question for me about the vehicles that are currently being used by the detectives that you would be passing these cars down to? How many miles are on those and what are those looking like in terms of replacement?
I do apologize. I can't give you the specifics off the top of my head, but they range in age from probably the newest is probably four years old to probably 10 years old. We have any variation of, depending on what they've gotten passed down or when we had put the unmarked fleet plan in place, we started buying a few Fusions for those divisions, and those have worked out well. We bought a Ford Escape for them. So those kind of vehicles have worked out well. But yeah, we do have some older vehicles in those divisions that really do need to be replaced and cycled out.
And just a comment to add to that, as chair of the Public Safety and General Government Committee, we've been discussing the unmarked cars for a while now. I do support having an electric vehicle as part of the fleet. I think that we need some time to plan for that a little bit, but my concern is that if it was in the capital budget request last year and it's been pushed off to this year, we're saying no again. And with the supply chain demands coming down at a 30-month delay, if we end up doing a special appropriation at some point, we're still in a supply chain demand issue, and that's my concern. So I just think we need to be mindful of the timing of this.
And what I will say is when I spoke directly to where we ordered our marked vehicles, and they were saying absolutely it's 30 weeks out for those vehicles when we ordered them. And then we can also have up to, a 22-week delay in getting the upfit materials, and then a 3-month delay for the installation of those items.
I'm sorry.
So you could realistically look at
30 week or 30 months?
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Is it a 30 week or a 30-month delay?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, 30 week. I apologize.
It's not a 30-month.
30 week
Okay.
delay.
Okay.
That's a big difference.
It's a 30 week from order date. I was told 30 weeks for the current vehicles that we have on order.
I think in my opinion, I think that does change some of the calculus with this decision. I think I think the one thing that I keep thinking about, and I think Mr. Burnett made a lot of very good points, but the one thing I'm also thinking about is the same arguments with regard to supply chain probably also apply to whatever these fleet vehicles are on DPW, and we just don't know what those are. I think Mr. Keegan asked an excellent question about a special capital appropriation, so that if we can do it, we should. And I also, with regard to, and this is a point I just wanted to touch up on regarding hybrid vehicles, yes, currently they are more expensive on the front end, but the idea is that by uses of hybrid vehicles over the long term, it's actually a cost saving to the city, not a cost detriment to the city.
What I will say is the vehicles we priced out are hybrid.
Yeah, and I also commend the police department. I know there was a recent approval in the Public Safety Commission, and I think by the larger council, for 10 hybrid vehicles as well. So it's not like the police department isn't heading in this direction already, and obviously they should be commended, and the city should be commended for approving them. But I do think that the 30-week versus 30-month discrepancy definitely changes the calculus of this decision.
Further discussion or comment? Just for clarity, Deputy Chief, Mr. Hooverman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see that Chris Torre just joined the call, and it'd be nice to hear from DPW perhaps about if he's able to answer this question about what was earmarked for that fleet services number as well, if we're going to be talking about taking money away.
Mr. Torre, are you with us? And did you hear the question?
I did, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'm sorry for joining late. I didn't know that it was an issue until it was an issue. The last year, we cut our fleet budget in half. So we asked for half of what we normally would ask for historically because of COVID. So we only actually bought 2 trucks last year total, 1 plow truck and 1 smaller V plow truck. This year was 2 plow trucks. And given the fact that we were told this year that the plow trucks were going to increase by $60,000 next year, it would behoove us to get those this year. We're replacing a sign truck that's a 1985 GMC Chevy truck that we can't get parts for anymore, and 2 lowboy trucks that we fill potholes with and do such tasks like that we need. And I certainly don't want to compete against another department for money or resources. I can just say what we need, and you guys are the council, and hopefully that you do what's best for the city and best for every department.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Deputy Chief Zecca, just for clarification, what year are the vehicles that you're driving now, the 3 administrative officers?
2000, we got them in December of 2016.
Any further comments or discussion? Seeing none, then I will ask for a vote on the amendment as proposed by Mr. Burnett. All in favor? Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Can I request a roll call vote on this, please?
I think so. I was going to ask for that. Ms. Dixon, if you would call for a roll call vote on this.
Burnett,
Aye.
Mr. Goldstein.
No.
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
No.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson,
No.
Ms. Najilski Eichner,
No.
Ms. Smith,
No.
Ms. Ayers,
Abstain?
Mr. Uvelman,
Nay.
Ms. Revoluz,
Abstain.
Ms. Young,
Abstain.
Mr. Kites,
Yes.
Ms. McMurr,
No.
Ms. Alterman,
No.
Mr. Keegan,
No.
Mr. Livingston,
No.
Ms. Shanahan?
No.
Thank you. We have 2 yes, 3 abstentions, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 nay.
So the motion fails 10 to 3 to 2, I believe. Is that 10 to 2 to 3? Yeah. So now we'll call the vote on the capital budget as proposed. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? So it looks to me as 14 in favor, 1 opposed. So the motion carries. Okay, next item on the agenda is item 7D5, Mr. Livingston.
Actually, it's 7D2.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's 7B.
It's 2A.
2A and 2B.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm going to move both items. I'll speak to them if I could. Item 2A, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute an amendment to the agreement with Newfield Construction Group as the construction manager for the Cranberry Elementary School new project to accept the guaranteed maximum price in the amount of $39,985,618. Account noted. To be authorized building management to issue change orders on contract for a total not to exceed $1.3 million. And I just want to note that this is the next step in the city's ongoing school construction project. The new Cranberry School will be state-of-the-art, including all new classrooms, new furniture, technology, security, standalone gym. The city went out to bid on the new school, and it's now proposed that the city accept this guaranteed maximum price for the project. I'll note that this is below the approved budget for the school and reflects the hard work of Alan Lowe and his team to bring this project in within the budget, and particularly in this current construction market. So I think it's a real achievement, and Alan and his team deserve great credit for this. If approved, the construction will start next month, and students will be scheduled to move in the fall of 2023 with final completion of the project in June 2024. That is after all the site work is completed. Alan Lowe is here to answer any questions anybody has.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Lowe? Seeing no questions right now, are there any comments regarding this item? I don't see any either. I do want to say, from my perspective, thank you to everybody involved. I think this council and my administration has shown a tremendous commitment to our infrastructure, especially our school buildings, helping young people and helping teachers to get the facilities that they need in order to be able to teach properly and feel comfortable and to have a good learning experience. And as Mr. Livingston mentioned, key to this whole issue, the hard work of Mr. Lowe and Mr. Giuliani for their commitment. They work hard every single day trying to make sure that we do get the best possible results out of these building projects. And I think if you would look at the new PONUS attachment, and you'll eventually see the renovated as new Jefferson, you'll see that the work is top shelf, and it's simply because of these two individuals who put the estimate together and oversee the projects. And it's really exciting to see this happening in the city. So if there are no further comments, I will take a vote. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Now we can go to item 7D5, Mr. Livingston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 5, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to issue an amendment to the agreement with Castle Booze Associates, Inc. for the Norwalk High School project to provide option B schematic design services, new sport complex design, field house design for a total not to exceed $826,700, account noted. This item relates to the additional architectural services required to move forward with the so-called option B for the new Norwalk High School. It's important to note that this amount is not all going to be spent at once, but will be incurred over the coming months as the project progresses. With current construction costs being what they are and projected to escalate at 4% or more, or approximately $600,000 a month for this project, this keeps the project moving forward, we believe, in a fiscally responsible manner.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. Comments? Mr. Keegan.
Yes, I do have one comment, Mayor. Thank you. I received an email earlier this week from a member of the Republican Party, Donna Smirniotopoulos. I sent a copy of the email to everyone. It's thorough. It's a little lengthy. I'm not going to read it publicly now, but I'm hoping that my colleagues, you'll take the time to read it. I did send it to our city clerk, and I asked that it be entered into the record as being received. Thank you.
Any further discussion or comment? See, oh, Ms. Johnson.
Hi, Mayor. Thank you.
You're hiding there. I
Hi,
can't.
thank you. Councilmember Goldstein. Just a point of clarification, as I understand it, in order for us to work to perhaps gain even more funding from the state, it would be necessary for us to have these schematics. Am I phrasing that correctly, or is maybe you get?
Alan Lowe can answer that, but the answer is we already have approval from the state. So is that maybe
Mr. Lowe?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe Mr.
Alan
Allen,
answer, because I
yes.
want to be careful when I say approval. So
Right.
Yeah.
My language is not
I don't know if you're talking about
appropriate as
the
well.
funds received versus the approval.
Right.
Mr. Lowe?
Yeah, I didn't really hear the question clearly.
Oh, and actually try to be more succinct. Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Just the idea.
Just call me Alan.
Alan, you got it. All right. Thanks. So we're seeking perhaps a little more funding for this project, as we know from
Right.
in our conversations. And so by accepting this tonight, that puts us on better footing to be able to do that. Is that a fair point? Yes, or it could be a straight up yes or no, if that makes it easy for you.
There's a great deal of efforts behind the scene in terms of keeping the project moving. We are looking to seek additional funding within the next couple of months. But at the same time, there's a substantial cost in cost of construction right now. Like Councilman Livingston have mentioned, at a $200 million project, we are carrying 4 to 5% increase per year. You do the math, it's come out to multi-million dollars a year for cost increase. So every month has its cost. So it's a balance between waiting and don't proceed with a project, and there's unwritten cost every month that we delay. It's a balance between continue moving forward. There's we're spending some money. I projected that each month probably about $150,000, but not doing something actually costs a lot more money. So there's a balance to be considered. So that's the main reason we want to continue to move forward, and we're in a better position to keep it going.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate that.
Further comments or discussion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, David
Yes.
Hughlin. I just wanted to say that so the money for this was done through the legislature. I believe it was House Bill 7010 that was passed in special session, I believe in 2020. So the money is statutorily appropriated and the percentage is statutorily appropriated, correct?
Yes, it's
Okay.
October. I think it was October, November of 2020.
Right.
It's 80% for the main project, and for certain items, for the it's less due to the different formula, like site work and things like that are prorated differently. But generally speaking, it's 80% reimbursement.
But that didn't come through any office in Hartford. That was through the legislature voted. That was enacted into law.
Right.
Correct? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Alan.
Any further discussions? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion as proposed? Opposed? Mr. Keegan opposed. Any abstentions? So the motion carries 14-1. Thank you. I'm sorry.
I think Heidi abstained.
I was just
Oh,
abstaining.
Mr. Heidi's abstained?
No, Heidi.
Oh, Heidi.
Alternate.
I'm sorry. Okay, Heidi. So it carries 13 yes, 1 no, and 1 abstention, Ms. Alterman, and the no is Mr. Keegan. Any, Ms. Revelus, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. You need a motion?
I'm waiting.
You need a motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
I'm here for it. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions. Thank you all for a wonderful evening
Have
and
a
for
good
your
night,
hard
everyone.
work.